Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. Our case this week is the murder of Dana Pastori, who might not have been found if it wasn't for the devastation Hurricane Katrina left in its wake. So as always, I ask you to join me as we remember Dana Pastori. On October 21st, 2005, Detective Greg Hamilton of the New Orleans Police Department received a call. 5th District police officers were summoned to the property at 939 Elysian Fields Avenue by the owners Rodney Hoover and Kathleen Greer. At the time, New Orleans was still recovering from the impact of Hurricane Katrina. Floodwaters were finally receding, which sadly meant victims from the storm were slowly unearthed. Every day, Detective Hamilton received calls such as this, where another body was recovered, and he was sent in to determine if cause of death was Katrina and then notify their next of kin. But when he arrived, he slowly realized this was no ordinary storm victim. In fact, upon closer inspection of this trunk, he realized this victim had been deceased long before Katrina. The trunk in question was gray and tan, constructed of particle board. The lock was pried open, and next to the overturned trunk was a decomposed, mummified body. The arms and legs were dismembered. Inside of the trunk were various articles of clothing, a curling iron, a sheet, beer can, mothballs, and dead maggots. Detective Hamilton made contact with Rodney Hoover, who initially discovered the body. Rodney explained the trunk was stored in the first floor of their 2-story home. Rodney and Kathleen split the 2 levels into apartments, using this particular unit for storage only. He stated the trunk did not belong to him, but a tenant who was also the boyfriend of their daughter Tracy. The boyfriend's name was John Morgan, and he asked Rodney when he moved in if he could store some of his belongings in the storage apartment, and Rodney agreed. Rodney remembered helping him move 2 trunks into the room, but stated he was not aware of its contents. He did recall it had an odor, but John blamed this on his previous landlord, stating the apartment was infested with rats. John lived in one of the 2nd floor units with Tracy for 7 months. The couple evacuated after Katrina when they received $2,000 from FEMA aid. When John and Tracy made it clear they would not be returning, John told Rodney he no longer wanted any of his belongings he left behind. While cleaning the property of storm debris, Rodney decided to clean out the storage room as well. He removed the trunk and pulled it to the trash pile. He forced the lock open and dumped its contents onto the ground, and the body fell out of the trunk. Kathleen informed Detective Hamilton she entered the apartment John and Tracy lived in, where she discovered a small lockbox left open. Inside of the box, she discovered John's fishing license, a credit card, and various documents belonging to a woman named Dana Pastori. The documents included her driver's license, passport, social security card, and birth certificates belonging to her and her children. While discussing the find, Kathleen recognized Dana's name, but confirmed they did not know her, but they were aware she was John's ex-girlfriend. She claimed John said ugly things about Dana, and that she had moved away to Czechoslovakia. He also learns the couple shared an apartment a few streets over. The documents were given to Detective Hamilton, and he went to the next lead, Maria Barranco, their previous landlord. Maria confirmed the couple lived in her front apartment for approximately 2 years beginning in 2000. She knew both Dana and John worked the graveyard shift at the Quartermaster Deli, located next door to the apartment building. She was the cashier, while he was a delivery man. For the most part, the 2 kept to themselves and were good tenants. But then, around March 2002, she stopped seeing Dana. Maria asked about where Dana was, and John informed her she had been in an accident. According to John, Dana was struck in the back of her neck by a toolbox, causing a concussion. While she was in the hospital, he stated her father came to visit and decided to take her back to his home in another state for recovery. Anytime she saw John, she would ask about Dana, where he would only state she was getting better. One time he claimed she got a job as a dispatcher. After Dana left, John moved another woman into the apartment in October of 2003. Then 8 months later, Tracy moved in. Maria claimed anytime she walked by John's apartment, you could smell this horrible odor. When she questioned him about it, he claimed it was from dead rats in the walls, since the apartment was infested. He lived here until 2004, then he slowly removed his belongings from the apartment. As John was moving out, Maria stood by and watched. She claimed his clothing he carried out from the apartment had that same awful smell. When she asked him about it again, this time he claimed he hadn't bathed in 3 days. He placed a trunk onto a dolly and walked it over a few streets to Elysian Fields Avenue. Maria stated this was the last time she saw him. Once it was clear John was not returning, Maria entered the apartment for the first time since he moved in. She immediately gagged from the stench. She wasn't sure what it was, but was positive this smell was not a dead rat. She noticed the origin of the smell seemed to come from a small crawl space inside of the kitchen. Detective Hamilton examined the small space and noticed the lingering odor. He observed stains on the wall, door, and floor. He felt like the trunk could have easily fit in this space. Maggot egg casings and a white powder were observed along the baseboard. Samples were taken of the areas and sent off for testing. The body was removed and transported to the coroner's office for an autopsy. It was in an advanced state of decomposition from the chest up. The body was skeletonized and only a few pieces of tissue and muscle remained. No blood or bodily fluids were found inside of the trunk, indicating the body likely decomposed elsewhere before being placed inside of the trunk. The electric cord with a curling iron attached was wrapped and knotted around the victim's neck. The cause of death was strangulation, and the investigation was ruled a homicide. To help identify the body, a tibia bone was sent to the FBI crime lab in Quantico for testing. The bone, however, was too dry to test, so instead a tooth was sent in its place. From the tooth, a DNA profile was constructed, but they needed familial DNA to compare. The stains from the crawl space were also tested with liquid crystal violet, since it was believed to be human blood, but the results were negative. Detective Hamilton continued his search for Dana and John, turning his attention to the deli. He met with Lynn, an employee at the deli. Lynn called Dana Polly and said from the outside looking in, the relationship between John and Dana was professional, though John could be controlling, and at times he got verbal with her even on the clock. No one ever noticed bruises, though. Lynn provided him with Dana's employment record, which reflected Dana's position in her last worked shift in March of 2002. Dana told the deli on March 15, 2002, she had plans to leave New Orleans. She was tired of the city and ready to pursue her dreams. She was still scheduled to work another 2 weeks, but then she didn't come in for her last scheduled shift. When asked about Dana's sudden disappearance, Morgan told her coworkers about her accident. They asked if they could see her, but he explained she was not in good shape and she was in ICU, so she couldn't take visitors. During recovery, he again stated her father took her back to his home to recuperate. They would occasionally check in about Dana while John was still working at the deli, but he always claimed she was fine. John's behavior around the deli started to change. Prior to Dana's departure, he was always neat and orderly, but then he let himself go. They noticed John was starting to look sickly and skinny. They believed he started using drugs. His whole personality and attitude changed. His last update regarding Dana was she traveled to Prague, where she eventually moved, so she could write her memoir. After he quit the deli, Lynn stated she saw him a month after Katrina, but the two did not speak about Dana. From several people he spoke to at the deli, Detective Hamilton gathered the couple had a bad fight during Mardi Gras, and a couple of weeks after, she gave her notice. Detective Hamilton started tracking down potential family members for Dana. With her maiden name of Surratt, he finally got a lead. Dana's father, Peter Surratt of Dayton, Ohio, spent the last few weeks trying to make contact with his daughter. He knew the city was bad off from the storm, and from emails sent by Dana to his other daughter, he knew she planned to ride out the storm and make contact when she could. But the retired Lake County police officer could not let it be. They hadn't heard from her in 2 months. He made a connection with a friend on the force in New Orleans. Peter had his friend check the apartment, but no one was there. Dana had glaucoma and needed her monthly prescription to help with the condition, so Peter had him check the pharmacy. The pharmacist at Royal Pharmacy informed the officer the last time the prescription was picked up was in 2001. When Detective Hamilton and Peter connected, Detective Hamilton was under the impression Dana moved to Europe, while her father thought she was still in Louisiana. Detective Hamilton explained to Peter they found a body and were concerned it might be Dana. In order to confirm the identification of the body, Peter put him in touch with Dana's mother, Frances. Frances, who hadn't spoken to her daughter in a few years, had no knowledge of an auto accident or a possible move to Europe, but she was aware of Dana's on and off again boyfriend, John. Frances provided a DNA sample for mitochondrial comparison of the known sample from the victim. Sadly, the test came back a match, and the victim in the trunk was identified as Dana Pastori. Born in 1966 in Corpus Christi, Texas, to parents Peter and Frances, Dana grew up not knowing her father. Her mother didn't like to talk about him since it was a brief affair. Dana didn't reconnect with her father until she was married with her own children. From building a relationship with her dad, Dana discovered she had 3 half-siblings. She spent the lost time building a relationship with them, confiding in one of her sisters often. Dana did get married to a man named Frank Pastori, and together they had 2 daughters. The Pastori family lived in Pensacola, Florida, and owned a restaurant. Her sisters stated from the outside looking in it was the perfect life. But Dana wasn't happy with where she was. The marriage was rocky. Dana and Frank didn't see eye to eye on many things, especially Dana's spirituality and beliefs. She tried to stick it out for her children, but eventually the marriage ended in 1994. Dana relocated to New Orleans with intentions of bringing her children after she was settled. Dana lived for her children, but knew leaving them in a familiar environment during this difficult time would be for the best. When she arrived in New Orleans, Dana felt it was where she belonged all along. The people were accepting, and she just knew she could be herself. By 1995, her divorce was finalized. Dana was not given custody of her daughters due to abandonment. She was devastated by the judgment, but would not give up. 3 months after the divorce, Frank remarried and moved to Ohio, where Dana visited her girls periodically. In December that year, her daughters visited her in Louisiana for Christmas, but she noticed something was off. She saw bruises, and their once happy demeanor was replaced by anxiety. Dana had her daughters evaluated by a psychiatrist who felt some form of abuse occurred. The girls were scared to return home, so she didn't make them. In January of 1996, Dana left Louisiana and planned to take her children to Canada, where the custody laws wouldn't apply. Dana was on the run for nearly a year. Frank hired a private investigator to track her down. Eventually, with the persuasion of her father and a fear of a potential decade in prison, Dana drove to Ohio and turned her children over. She was arrested and taken to jail in Dayton, Ohio. On June 10, 1998, Dana was sentenced up to 2 years of probation. She lived with her father until her legal problems were cleared, where she took the opportunity to be around her family and learn to read tarot cards. With her legal troubles over, Dana returned to New Orleans, where she decided to read tarot cards full-time in Jackson Square. It was here she became reacquainted with a man named John Morgan, who also made a living reading tarot cards. The couple had an instant connection, and Dana felt like he could protect her. She knew he was her soulmate. Dana still had her goal to bring her daughters home, but needed to save money. To supplement her income, John helped her gain employment as a cashier at the Quartermaster Deli, where he worked as well. To cut down on her expenses, he suggested she move into his apartment, and she agreed. Dana was fearless, especially with John by her side. But 4 years of working the graveyard shift in the French Quarter started to wear her down. She was restless, and she wanted more. She had had enough, and she was ready to pursue her dreams. And sadly, that was the last anyone heard of her. With the confirmation of Dana's death, her family was devastated. But with the help of Tracy's parents, police found John living in Mecklenburg, North Carolina. During his initial interview in November of 2005, he was shown a photo of the trunk, which he claimed he had a similar one, but it wasn't that one. He admitted he and Dana were in a relationship, but they never got along. Following an argument in 2002, she left him saying she was tired of him and the city, and it was the last time he saw her. Then, 2 weeks later, he received a card from her stating she was staying with her family and was fine. When Dana's body was identified in 2008, police finally had the evidence needed for a warrant. On February 8, 2008, John Morgan was arrested and taken in for questioning. During a videotaped interview, he stated his real name was John Allen Roberson. He and Dana dated on and off for years, and the relationship was intense. John claimed Dana had a temper which resulted in yelling arguments, but not physical fights. They argued often, and she usually left but always returned. He stuck to his story that their last argument, she left him, and that was the last time he saw her. John admitted at the time he had a bad drug problem. He claimed there wasn't a narcotic he didn't use, and most of his money went to his habit, which is what caused Dana to finally leave him. John initially denied having knowledge of Dana's death, but after his arrest, his story started to change. He stated after their argument, Dana threatened to turn him and those involved in supplying him drugs into the police. John left the apartment and went to the deli, where he contacted his dealer about Dana. His dealer indicated something bad was going to happen. This individual he called Pepper came to the deli shortly after, retrieved his keys, and told him to stay away from home. John claimed he returned the next morning to find Dana dead. Instead of calling the police, he decided to hide her body, keeping it in his apartment for years. The drug deal gone wrong angle was explored, but no one at the Quartermaster Deli knew of or saw someone named Pepper, leaving once again John as the only suspect in the case. Tracy Greer was interviewed as well, but she had no knowledge of the crime. She did not know Dana. John Morgan was charged with 1 count of second-degree murder. His trial was held on July 27, 2009, in which he pleaded not guilty to the charge. Following the 3-day trial, John was found guilty. He was sentenced in August of 2009, where he was given life without parole. John attempted to file an appeal, which was denied. He is currently being held at the Department of Corrections in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you have a great week ahead of you. But for now, we must part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends. Bye, friends. Bye, friends.